Today we are going to discuss different topics. We are going to talk about persuasive language, and we are going to consider the power of rhetoric. We are also discussing the rhetorical devices that are used by politicians. Examples of those rhetorical devices are simile, metaphor, personification, euphemism, parallelism, and the rule of three. Then we talk about the use of pronouns. Then we consider language and the media, and we talk about the potential power of the media, language and power. Then we move to talk about the sources of news, common sense discourse, and the power of change. So first of all, I want to talk about the persuasive language and the power of rhetoric, and let us start with a simple definition of the term rhetoric. What does the word rhetoric mean? Well, rhetoric is a group of rules that the speakers or the writers adhere to, abide to, so that they express themselves with eloquence. Eloquence is using language to the best effect. So those rules help writers, authors, to describe themselves, to express themselves in the best way, so that they use language to its best effect. So this is a definition of rhetoric generally, and there are some rhetorical devices that we are going to consider. Those rhetorical devices, as we said, are used by politicians to affect their audience or to make their point valid. So the first one we need to talk about is metaphor. What does metaphor as a rhetorical device mean? Metaphor is a way of comparing two different concepts. For example, if I say Sally is an angel, now I have two concepts, Sally and angel. I am comparing them together. I am assimilating Sally to an angel, but I am not really using any words like, as, or similar to. So I'm just saying that Sally in comparison to angel, they are the same. So this is simply what metaphor is. And to understand this meaning in a better way, we need to compare it with another rhetorical device, which I'm going to call simile. And a simile is very much similar to a metaphor, but with a simple difference, which is the use of as and like. So simile asserts that something is similar to something else. If a metaphor example is Sally is an angel, a simile metaphor would be Sally is like an angel. Sally is like an angel. Another example, their house is similar to a palace. Their house is similar to a palace. So the literal difference between a metaphor and a simile is the use of those articles which express similarity. So similarity and metaphor, while a metaphor asserts that something is something else, when we said Sally is an angel, a simile asserts that something is similar to something else. Now I have a group of examples for each rhetorical device. The examples that I have for similes have a counter example in the group which are metaphors. For example, if I say the room was like an oven, this is a simile because we are using the word like. But if I want to make this example a metaphor, I would say the room is an oven. Her hair is golden silk. Her hair was golden silk. Now none of these are similes. The first one is a metaphor. It is classified under simile by mistake. Her hair was golden silk. The sun was like a diamond in the sky. So the sun was like. So again, I'm using this word to express a simile. The sun was a diamond in the sky. He was like a lion in the battle. He was a lion in the battle. So when it is a simile, there is a word like as, or similar to, or like. Her smile was as bright as the sun. So this is another example of a simile. The night was as black as tar. So again, those are examples of simile because I'm using those articles. We move to examples showing the use of metaphor and simile in politics. The first example we have by Margaret Thatcher in 1983 when she says, "The vast wealth producing engine of the West began to splutter." Now, what Thatcher is doing here is that she talks about the Western economy, which she says is an engine. So there is a metaphor, there is no use for words like as or similar to or like, but she is comparing something to something else. She is claiming that something is something else. So the vast wealth producing engine, so she's talking about economy, but she is calling it an engine. Another example by Graham Stringler, 1997, who says, "The airport is already acknowledged as the economic motor of the region." So here we have an example of simile because Graham is using those articles like as, similar to, or like. So the airport is assimilated to an economic motto. Then we move to another rhetorical device, which is personification. And by definition, the word personification means it is, of course, a rhetorical device that entails giving a human characteristic to inanimate object or abstract ideas. So if I have a characteristic which belong to humans and I attribute these characteristics to something which is not human, something could be an animal or any inanimate object, something that does not have life in it. An example for this is, first we are having political examples. The first one is by President Lyndon Johnson. The example says, "Once again the heart of America is heavy." Now the use of personification in this example can give the speech a poetic rhythm. Now how there is a personification in this example? Simply because having a heart is not a characteristic of countries, but what this president is doing here is he is giving these characteristics, having a heart, to America, which is an inanimate object or country. So this is an example of personification. Now why he is using personification in such a political speech? This, we believe, gives his speech a poetic rhythm, a more influence, and his message can go through easily. Another example by a British TV news in 1990s, "Germany is the bully in the playground." Again, Germany is the bully in the playground. Now this is a British TV news and the person presenting the news says Germany is the bully. Now we know that bully is a characteristic of a human, but he is attributing this characteristic to Germany. Again, this is another example of personification. Further examples could include Germany is the conductor of orchestra. Now we know that when we have orchestra, the only person who can conduct an orchestra is a human being, but not a thing or a country. So we are also giving this to a name of a country. Germany is the captain of the ship. Again, captains of ships are usually humans, but not countries. So this is example of personification. The use of personification in those examples has an ideological effect, indicating that Germany's strong or Germany's strength and influence in the European Union. A further example of rhetorical devices is euphemism. Now euphemism is also a rhetorical device, uses mild or inoffensive language to make something seem more positive than it actually appears. So especially with topics that we cannot frankly talk about, we cannot openly talk about, we use this device, which we call euphemism, to make the topic of our conversation looks positive, but in fact it is not, or it is not easy to talk about. So it is a rhetorical device using mild language, inoffensive language, not clear language, not open language, not explicit language. And the reason is, as we said, to make something looks or seem more positive than it actually is. The example we have, sorry, when we talk about sex, or when somebody dies and we do not want to talk openly about this, if somebody, for example, dies, I would say he passed away instead of saying he died. This is an example of euphemism. Now, talking about sex, instead of saying clearly he made sex or she made sex with somebody else, I would say they made love instead of having sexual intercourse. Now, how this rhetorical device is used in politics, especially in military matters, and the examples that we have from military, when we say a clean strikes. Now, strikes are usually not clean, they are deadly, they are fatal, they kill people, but saying clean is meaning that it cleans the whole area, it kills all those people, but it is just a term to cover the negative aspect of those strikes, and we say clean instead of deadly or instead of fatal. So clean strikes would refer to deadly strikes. And another example is when we say decommissioning. When somebody has a mission, then you decide to decommission his mission, and you say your mission has been decommissioned. Now, this doesn't mean actually stopping the mission, but actually it means disarming this person, taking his weapons off. So both weapons beyond use is another type of euphemism, which means surrender. If two armies in the battlefield decide to put weapons beyond use, they means one of them should surrender to the other. So instead of saying surrender to us, they say put your weapons beyond use, which means surrender, stop using them. Another example in politics related to euphemism is a very famous term called ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing. Now, in certain countries, especially nowadays, they try to clean whoever does not belong to a certain entity or to a certain ethnicity. For example, the word ethnic cleansing would refer to removing people out of their country, but this removal is made by force, so forcing them to leave the country. So instead of saying forcible removal of civilians from their countries, they would say ethnic cleansing. So they are actually, this term is used to hide the fact of forcing civilians to move out of their homes because they belong to a specific ethnic group. Another example from politics is diplomatic meetings. In diplomatic meetings, we could have euphemism terms, something like free and frank exchange of views. Now, this does not really mean frank or free, it really means something different, which is actually flaming row. So two parties, they had a meeting, then after they came out of the meeting, they say, oh, the meeting was free and there was frank exchange of views. But the fact, this is a cover term for what actually happened in the meeting, which is a flaming row, where they were about to quarrel, in fact. The next rhetorical device which we are going to consider is called the rule of three. The rule of three. Now, it is a rhetorical device where a statement is divided into three parts or points. Now, this is clear in many political speeches. When a president, a prime minister giving his speech, we notice that he divides his statements, his sentences, into three parts. Now, this division can make this particular statement more important, it might become more effective to the people, to the audience who are listening. An example of this from Abraham Lincoln, when he says, this government this government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Notice how this three-division statement has got a better effect than it really is. So the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. So the division of the statement into three parts can give it a better influence. Another example is the cry of the French Revolution: liberty, equality, and brotherhood. See, we have divided our sentence into three parts, and the feeling and the message that we want to give to our listener, to our audience, is that this is an important message. This need to be taken into consideration, etc. So the cry of the French Revolution: liberty, equality, and brotherhood. Another example by Tony Blair. Tony Blair claimed that three main commitments of the Labour Party were education, education, education. So repeating this term education three times has a more influence on the hearer or on the audience. So when they see this division, the division of a statement into three parts, this division would make the sentence or would convey the message through to the audience. Next, we will talk about another rhetorical device which is called parallelism. And parallelism is a rhetorical device which expresses several ideas in a series of similar structure. Now, politicians use parallel structure when they want to draw attention to a particular part of their message. Again, so parallelism is when the structure of the sentence is parallel. You have more than one similar structure, but those structures are almost the same structure-wise. And as we said, this type of rhetorical device is used by politicians. The example I have here: we shall fight in the beaches, we shall fight on the landing ground, and we shall fight in the fields and in the street. Now this political speech is by Winston Churchill, and as you notice, he has divided his speech into more than one sentence, but those sentences are parallel in structure. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing ground, we shall fight on the fields, etc. So this can serve to emphasize that the ideas are equal in importance and add a sense of symmetry, equality, and rhythm to his speech and make the speech more memorable. The other use of rhetorical devices is the use of pronouns, and pronouns can be used either to emphasize or obscure the responsibility and agency. Now this can be very clear when we consider the following example. Now I'm reading this example by United States President George Bush, when he moves from using one pronoun to another, starting by the pronoun we, then using the pronoun I. Now we want to know how this is actually influential. We have no choice but to consider retreating combat units as a threat. Nearly 6 weeks ago, I. Now notice the move. He now uses another pronoun. I said that our efforts are on course. So this is President George Bush. Why do you think George Bush changed from we to I? Now the answer is very simple. He uses we when the focus of his speech is relatively controversial. He is not sure of what he is saying. So the responsibility does not go to him directly, but to more than one person. That's why he says we, as it is unclear whom we refers to. He uses the pronoun I when he is on safer ground, and where he claims responsibility for positive achievement. So moving to I is drawing our attention that what he is going to say is made by his own efforts, so he is claiming those positive achievement to himself. Now we move to the study of language and media, and when I say the word media, this indicates the use of press, newspapers, magazines, the radio, the television, broadcasting, and the World Wide Web or the internet. Now, why the media is important? It is important because we get our knowledge of the world through media, because many of us get whatever they know about the world, or at least the majority of what they know is through either TV or through their website or through an internet website or through the newspapers or through, as I said, the TV and any other type of media, whether it is a TV or a radio or newspaper or generally the internet. So the media is very important because it is the basis for founding our knowledge. Now, why the media has become very powerful? What is the potential power of the media? The media can represent a powerful source in a society, and we have several reasons for this. First, the media can select what counts as a news. Now, if you open your TV on a news channel, the news that you are going to listen to are considered news because the channel has decided to call them news or to consider them as a news. So the media has the power of choosing what counts as a news. One thing happened, they might report it as the striking news or as a secondary news, or they always talk about it, or they leave it till the end. So they pick and choose whatever they think is representative of a news. Why it is important? It is also important because it can decide who gets on the television, or who gets on the radio, who is being interviewed in a newspaper. So the media is a powerful device. It can decide who are the person that we want the public to listen to them. Are they prophecies? Are they actors and actresses? So the media has the power of deciding who gets on TV, who speaks on TV, and when you speak on TV, you are being watched by millions of people all over the world, and this has an influence on the people of your country, on the people of your area. So the media is very powerful because it has the power of selecting or choosing or picking who are the people concerned who can get on TV or gets on radio or a newspaper. It is also powerful because it has become an integral and essential part of our life. Most of us nowadays will communicate through the internet, will have an email account, and they want to communicate with their families if they were abroad through an internet website. So internet has become a very important device in our life, which is part of media. That's why media is a very powerful device in any society. It has an influence, and even it is a political influence, especially nowadays when all those news are controversial. So a channel can choose what counts and what doesn't count as news. We move to another idea, which is media, language, and power. And we start with a definition of the term linguistic representation. How an article, how a story, how an event is represented linguistically. So linguistic representation is a level of language use which is concerned with the relation between how a story is told and how this can lead to different views or different versions of the same story. So imagine that an accident happened and there are two journalists. Each one will report this accident differently. Now this difference in reporting the same event or the same accident will result in different point of views, because those journalists might be different in the way they represent this accident or that event. So the first journalist, for example, may narrate the event as they appeared. So he watched the event, he was there, so he narrates the event as it appeared. He would give informative facts that the accident happened, 2 people were killed, the police has arrived, etc. Then he states official sources from police and hospital. After he finds who has died, who was injured, he goes to the hospital, he meets the doctor, and he reads the record of those injured people. So his report is based on information taken from official sources, and whatever he reports is reported objectively. Now, on the other hand, another journalist might openly refer to the ethnic community the involved individual belongs to. For example, he said, the person who made the accident is American, or he is Jewish, or he is Syrian, etc. So he concentrates on the ethnic background of the person who has done the accident. Or he might give expected incident because he does not attended the incident. He tried to guess what happened. So whatever he says is reported by himself. Nobody has really witnessed what happened, so he guesses what happened. Uses unofficial sources like friends and personal experience, and his report becomes subjective. He reports events or incidents subjectively. What are the sources of news? What sources of news we have? The factuality level of the source is very important. When we say I know this particular piece of information, we need to know how factual this piece of information is. What source you have depended on to give this sort of information. So an example of unreliable source is when you say a friend of Mr. Carling is reported as saying, so we do not know who is this Carling and we do not know who is his friend. So this is unreliable source. We cannot say that this is an factual piece of information. He told me that, or he told me later, or something like this. So who is this he? We need to know who are those people. Are they official? Are they police officers, etc.? So these are examples of third or fourth hand sources. They are not first hand, they are fourth hand even type of sources, because the reported information is difficult to retrieve or to verify. Now we move to another definition of what's called common sense discourse. Discourse used in linguistics with a range of meaning. It can refer to any piece of connected language which contains more than one sentence. It can also refer to conversation. This is what the word discourse generally mean. Now we move to what the word common sense discourse indicate. Now the prevailing way that a culture talks about or represents something is called the dominant discourse. Now if you tell somebody, I want to go to the forest and I want to try I want to go to the forest and wanted to try to understand what the plants are saying. Now this is not common sense, because we do not usually speak like this. We do not have conversation like this. Instead, you could say, I want to go to the forest to be inspired by nature. Now this is common sense discourse. Everybody would agree on this. But saying the first example would not look as a common sense discourse. The power of change. Media can lead to different changes in the society. Number one, the use of non-sexist language. For example, the use of grammatical forms which are neutral, such as the third person pronoun being a non-specific gender. So non-specific gender pronouns can show how neutral you are in the language you use. Are you taking the side of female or the side of males? For example, a gender-specific noun would be fireman or chairman. Now there is a gender related to this word, because when you say fireman, it is not firewoman, because you are saying fireman. So this is related to the gender of this occupation. But a gender neutral noun for those two words would be firefighter. So instead of saying fireman or firewoman, so you do not want to look either supporting men or women, you say firefighter. Or instead of saying chairman, you could say chairperson. So the word person is a neutral, does not refer to a specific man or to a specific gender, but it is a neutral. It can refer to men, it can refer to women. Here is an example of sexist language where the athlete should get the appropriate amount of rest before his match. Again, the athlete should get the appropriate amount of rest before his match. Now the pronoun his would indicate that the word athlete here is a type of sexist indication, because the speaker believes that a typical athlete would be a male person. The correction for this sentence is that the athlete should get the appropriate amount of rest before his or her match. Now here we have some examples of occupations which can be supporting one gender rather than another. You can read them yourself. Waitress, you can say server instead of saying waitress or waiter, server. Saleswoman or salesman, you can say sales representative, etc. This is the end of this lecture. Thank you very much.